So welcome everyone tonight to February 16th. We are incredibly excited to welcome you to Sanctuary Online.live. I'm your host, Joe Bell, and really excited to bring you quite an amazing evening. And as we have a number of new folks on tonight, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just let you know how we do what we do here at Sanctuary Online. First off, one of our missions is to create and keep cross-pollinating our communities. So if you are able to, with whatever power you have on tonight, if you could enable your video so we can see your gorgeous faces, we love that. In addition, if you take a look up on the right-hand side of your screen and make sure that you're in gallery view, that way you can see everyone and everyone can see you. Otherwise, you just see one big face, like currently mine, and that's not nearly as nice as seeing all these beautiful faces. We also love it if you are able to open your chat box, and normally we have folks put in their first and last name, their email address, and we're able to send you each week. We send you an email of what happened last week at Sanctuary, who's coming up next week, so we keep everyone informed that way. So if we don't have it on file yet, if you could put your first and last name in the chat box and then your email address. Also, tonight you can tell if you're reading the chat that people are putting in where they're calling in from and their current temperature. So there's quite a competition in the chat box of how miserable people are if they were to go outside their homes, and for some of you inside your homes, because I know my sister's been calling us from Dallas with cuddles and hats and scarves on as they rotate the blackouts there down in Texas. And Dr. Knight, you're calling us from south of that in Texas. So we're hoping that your power stays on long enough for you to be with us tonight. We're really happy that you're able to be here under temperature duress. Also, if you're new with us, we have a neat feature. If you'd like to be reminded on Tuesday afternoon, Sanctuary Online sends out a little tiny chat feature to a text message to your cell phone and says, hey, in case you forgot it was Tuesday, here we are, and here's what we're doing tonight. So it's a really neat feature if you'd like to be reminded. Little bit of an update here. Here is, Sanctuary in the Woods or Sanctuary in the Snow. Obviously, whenever the weather changes, we try and get a picture of our gorgeous Sanctuary stone. And also these two sillies enjoying, God, I can't even believe that Sanctuary, that picture. Oops, I'm sorry. But there's Governor, who was actually born in northern Michigan. So Carolyn, she's from God's country up here. But she left as a little tiny puppy. She was only about as big as her head when she left Michigan and became a Texas dog. And there's her, I think, teaching Molly. Molly's her daughter, a golden doodle, all about snow. So that's what's going on. And that's what it looks like in Texas tonight. So goodness gracious, we missed that. And have to shout it out. My mom turned 92 today. She's a member of the Sanctuary Online gang. So she is 92 years and still, look at a little crown on tonight. And we had a big surprise dinner. This is her family, so just our pod. All of us were careful. We have our masks on in our other pictures. But I wanted to shout out to Mom, 92 years and going strong. So, and she's
fabulous.
She's so happy. Big surprise tonight for her. So that was cool. Again, this week, we want to say thank you to Ken, who did 2 amazing weeks on how the great religions began and what the great religions believe. Really neat. If you missed those, they are on our Sanctuary Online YouTube channel, so we can always give you access to that. Tonight, we have an incredible guest panel. I'll introduce you to our guest speakers in just a moment. And I want to remind you, next week is our book club. So every month we read a fabulous book. And this month is Fanny Flagg, Can't Wait to Get to Heaven. And I honestly think you still have time to read this, don't they, Cheryl? Pretty easy read. So if you haven't picked this book up yet, it's getting great reviews, called an easy read and really enjoyable. So the thing I love about our last week of the month at Sanctuary, people come to the conversation who haven't even read the book. because it's just a really neat, wonderful group of people. So nothing on your calendar next Tuesday night, please join us. And then of course we have got to advertise. We are incredibly excited to bring Creating a Life That Matters online. We're doing a little pilot inside the season of Lent, where each night we have a guest facilitator, and we'll be actually testing how to break CLM out of its, you know, kind of the container it's been in for the last years and years and years and years and years, 14, 16 years. And so we're incredibly excited to offer this as a Lenten series. And it is a series that will build on each other. It's actually a curriculum. And so we will be giving you homework between sessions, and very excited to try this pilot. And again, there's thanks to Ken last week and the week before for doing the work on the great religions. So tonight, I want to introduce you kind of quickly to our panelists. And then what I will do, I've got a little bit of background here. I'm going to mute a few of you out. Sorry about that. But you may, these three faces may seem familiar to you. And we did a wonderful work around Kwanzaa on December 31st. Carolyn, Dr. Knight, Brendan were members of a panel that brought us the 7 principles of Kwanzaa. And it was just so, oh, it was just wonderful. And you all three told stories that night that piqued our curiosity and wanted us to learn more. And we thought, what better to do than ask if you would come back during Black History Month and just share a little bit about your family's journey, your personal journey. We were going to name this tonight the history we didn't learn in school. And we didn't want to be sad about things because I always want to be uplifting, but I hope tonight pisses you off a little bit because these are stories and experiences that many of us have no idea of. And as we know, our work from all the work we did last year is to learn and to grow and to listen and to be okay with having been ignorant, and then do our work to stop that kind of work in the world, right? To uplift and to grow. So it's with a great honor that we bring you these 3 speakers tonight. And how we're going to do that, Dr. Knight, since you are in, let's see, because it's possible that we might not have you for very long tonight, which would be incredibly sad, we would invited you to speak first. And how this is going to work, my friends, is each of the speakers has presented a part of their story, their family's story. And they'll speak for 5 minutes or so. And then I want you to be thinking of questions. Just, you know, when we have the opportunity to have such wonderful people in front of us, please, we'll look for a dialogue after they share. And so you can put those questions or thoughts or comments in the chat box. And then after each speaker is done with their presentation part, we'll go ahead and we'll lift some of those up into the conversation and just see how the night rolls. Okay? Any questions before we start? All right, most of you are muted right now, which is the right way to be, so we can have a nice time. And Dr. Knight, this group of gorgeous people are all yours.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks so much for taking the time to spend some time together and investigate and have some information about some individuals and what their individual experiences may have been. For me, history was not written in a book. I didn't find out about history in class. I found history at home. History for me began with the stories of my parents, with the stories of my aunts and uncles, with the stories of my grandparents. And those stories parallel the stories of Black people in America. It began in the early 20th century. My grandfather was lynched. He was lynched while my mother was still being carried in her mother's womb. And the experience was so traumatic that once my mother was born, her mother had what we call now a nervous breakdown. And my mother was sent to live with her aunts. And these were women who were one generation away from having arrived on a ship. And so their sensibility and their awareness included their African heritage. And what this did was this planted in my mother a great appreciation for things African and for her connection to what she referred to always as Mother Africa. But once my grandmother got over the trauma and was able to bring my mother back to live with her in Memphis, she met my father. They married. They had 4 children. They had a business. They had a thriving grocery store in Memphis, Tennessee. We lived about a half a block away from the grocery store. My mom could stand at the store and watch us walk from our house to the store. And it was a thriving business. But my father was a great orator. And in his oratory, he happened to speak out against the gentleman who was running for sheriff in Memphis. This was a white gentleman, and my father had spoken out against some of his practices and some of his policies. And because my father had befriended some of the white officers, one of them came to my father late at night and said, there's a plan that they're going to not only lynch you, but they're going to burn your business to the ground. And so we gathered everything that we could fit into the trunk of the car. And we became part of the Great Migration that migrated from the South to the North. Members of my family had migrated to Chicago, to New York, to Detroit, but it ended up in Cleveland, Ohio, where I happened to grow up. And as I said, it was an education for me because we grew up in what I later discovered was the ghetto, but I didn't know it was a ghetto. It was just our neighborhood. Later on, I learned that I grew up in the ghetto. But when I was in the United States Navy, I had gone to boot camp in California, and I was in spy school in Pensacola, Florida. I'll never forget it. And a buddy of mine and I decided we were going to go into town. We had finally gotten enough credits to be able to go into town. So we decided we were going to go into town and take in a movie. So we get to the movie, and I'm from Cleveland. We were used to having the kiosk in front, the kiosk in front where you would buy your ticket. Well, there was no kiosk. So we go inside to the popcorn counter, and we said, well, we'd like to have a ticket. And the woman looks at me and says, well, you have to go around the side. And I said, well, maybe that's where the kiosk is. So we walk out the front and we turn the corner. And I'll never forget it. There's this flaking yellow paint on the side of the building and a pale green arrow pointed. And inside the green arrow, it says colored entrance. And I had never seen colored entrance. And so we went in, and I said, we need to buy 2 tickets. And the woman behind the glass, I'll never forget, she looked around, she says, is one of the tickets for him, pointing to my friend? And I said, yes. And she said, baby, I can't sell him a ticket. I said, what do you mean you can't sell him a ticket? She said, I can sell you a ticket for upstairs. I can sell him a ticket for downstairs together. I said, are you telling me that we cannot sit together to see a movie? She says, baby, that's just the way it is. And it was devastating. It was the first time in my life that I had been told that because of the color of my skin, I was not going to be able to have an experience, that I was being denied access as a result of the color of my skin. So for me, Black History Month is not history, it's what I lived through. And there are lots of other instances where it became clear that not only myself, but members of my family had to find a way to navigate our way through a society that literally looked for ways to oppress and repress. My movie experience was in 1963, and it was in Pensacola, Florida. Okay. So if you have some questions, I could share some other stories, but if you have questions, I'd be happy to entertain them and answer them if I can.
Oh, Dr. Knight. Oh, William, that's just thank you. That's not an easy thing to hear. And I'm sure a much less easy thing to live through and to have been part of your story.
Then I was I decided that I was going to go to college because all of my siblings went to college. My parents went to college, that's where they met, but all of our family, college was not an option. From the time that we were little, it was declared we would go to college. So I was able to get a scholarship to a small Lutheran college in Columbus, Ohio, called Capital University. And I got there, and there were 7 Black people out of a student body of 1,700. There were 7 of us. And I fell in with a group of theater folks who liked to play bridge during lunch hour. So we would play bridge during lunch hour. And there were about 7 or 8 of us, and we'd play bridge. And it was one fall afternoon, they announced that the Illinois Ballet was coming to Capitol. And the way it worked in our college was they would put up a seating chart, and you would just write in your student number in a seat, and that way you would guarantee that would be your ticket for the event, whatever the event was. So all 7 of us, we all went together, and we all put our names down for seats sitting together. But the 7 that put our names down, I was the only Black guy. All of the rest of them were white. Okay, so we get closer to the event, and all of them start dropping off. Because they have something else to do, they can't do it, and it ends up it's just me and this other girl, this white girl, and she and I had been buddies. I mean, you were just pals. And so she said, well, why don't you come by the dorm, and get me? And so I said, sure. Now, I had this, $29.95 Sears suit that I had, so we were going to dress up, and that was the best that I had. So I put on my little Sears suit and my little tie and went to her dorm. And when I knocked on the dorm mother looked at me and she says, what are you here for? And I said, I'm here to pick up whatever her name was. And she looked at me as if someone had just hit her in the head with a sledgehammer. So then this girl comes, now we've been playing bridge for months. I'd never seen her anything except a sweatshirt and jeans. Well, here she comes, and she's got this basic Black number that, costs hundreds of dollars. And she's got, a triple strand of pearls, and, she's as elegant as you could possibly be. And I'm going, who is this? I don't even know this person. But anyway, she was, and she had a little fur wrap around. And I'm like, my Lord. So we go into the theater. Now, hear this. We enter in the back doors of the auditorium. And as we are walking down the aisle, every single person in the auditorium turns and stares at us. And when we take our seats, the president of the college, who was sitting in the front row, stood up, turned, and looked at us, and then sat down. Now, I was a biology major, and this was on Saturday. On Monday, my biology professor, we were supposed to be talking about, I forget what we were supposed to be talking about, but he lectured us on the evils of miscegenation and how Mendel's law of misogyny was going to dilute and pollute the race if they ever mixed. And from that point on, I never got a passing grade. You know, I would compare my test results to my classmates. We would have written the same answer down. Mine was marked wrong, theirs were marked correct. And so it was clear to me that I was not going to be able to succeed. So that's when I left Ohio and went to California and have never returned.
Wow.
There you go. Carolyn, you're urging him on. I just, amen. That, right? Leaving behind what you have the ability to leave behind. Right. I've got a question here, Doctor, that says, does it make sense to you to say, how have things changed maybe between then and now in this last 25 years and in the last 4 to 5 years? Someone's saying in the Trump era.
What has happened in the Trump era is that all of the animosity, all of the fear, all of the hidden oppressive feelings, all of those were allowed to come to the surface. It was no longer necessary. It was no longer necessary for you to hide your animosity. It was no longer necessary for you to conceal that had these kind of feelings. And so what it did was it just exposed a layer of hate and vitriol that was positively frightening to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've got 2 questions here about how you were treated in the Navy and asking if you were actually in uniform when you went to the theater in Pensacola.
Yes, we were in uniform when we went to the theater in Pensacola. Absolutely, we were in uniform. And interestingly enough, I remember when I was going from Pensacola to Ohio to see my mom, we stopped in Atlanta, and I remember saying that there was the colored restrooms and the white restrooms, and I was saying, I don't want to do that, and I don't know whether it was the manager or somebody, but he looked at me and said, "Look, you can use whichever one you feel like," and I think that was a direct result of me being in uniform.
Yeah.
It certainly wouldn't have happened had I not been in uniform.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting. I did 10 years in the Marine Corps, and it was when I came out of the Marine Corps, I went almost directly into seminary, and the shock from in the Marine Corps thinking I was non-racist because we were taught to see everyone as green. Right. And that blending, that was a thing to be proud of, a thing about unity and, loads of reasons why that's a good teaching at certain arenas. And when I came out and into corporate and then into seminary, it just, it took me some time to unwrap how unhelpful that was and what I was not seeing because I was, and yet it's again, as I said earlier tonight, it's been such an interesting time of being able to be wrong, being able to be ignorant and owning it, but having a safe and yet challenging, and that's kind of how we try and market ourselves here. It's okay to be wrong here. It's okay for someone to share.
But I would beg to differ. I don't think it's wrong, and I don't think it's ignorance. What has happened is if you have never been exposed to that experiential reality, if that has never been your experience, if you've never had an opportunity to have an open heart-to-heart with someone who has had that, it's not something that you can get by osmosis. And if you've never had an opportunity to confront it in a safe place where you're not going to be threatened, where you're not going to be beaten up for not knowing what you don't know, then it's unrealistic to assume that there would be a way for you to know that. Yeah. So I think part of where we are is to accept that you can only be where you are. You can only know what you know. And what you do is, if you indicate a willingness and an openness to expand your experiential reality so that you have an openness to other experiences, then at that point, you can have the ability to approach this, in a way that's non-judgmental, in a way that's non-hurtful and non-harmful, that allows you to just say, I just didn't know.
Yeah.
And I think that's a healthy place to be.
Well, and thank you for that, Grace. It's still a challenging thing, I think, to recognize in yourself, and even if intentions were good, there was still pain or ignorance or harm caused by holding those beliefs. So yeah.
One of my basic core theological beliefs is, I will never ever question intention, but I will always teach consequences.
There you go. Yeah, that's okay. That's one worth writing down. Somebody in the chat. I will never question intention, but I will always teach consequences. Oh, thank you. I've got the chat box is lighting up here. So Cheryl, I'm going to go to you first to share your story, Cheryl Stockton, and then over to Jordan, and then I think we'll slide around our panel. Cheryl?
Cheryl Stockton?
Uh-huh.
Well, I just can so relate to what you're saying. If you haven't experienced it and you just don't even know the feeling, and I can't even now describe the feeling. The first time I really realized, I was so naive growing up in the Midwest, but when I got to Chicago, I learned a whole lot of things, and just the overwhelming, almost not understanding what was happening when I walked into that restaurant with a Black man on my arm, and just to see the looks and feel the tension in the room. And I was like, what's happening? I mean, I had no clue how devastating that could be. So I empathize a lot.
Yeah, thank you. And Jordan, you had a comment here as well.
Yes, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Knight. And I think your story is incredible. It's incredibly powerful because you really bridge a divide in American history. And K-Day, without really knowing that, a lot of the people that went through that era are still alive. And, it's not just an island, a moment in time. These are real stories and real people. And, I think it's interesting how you shared two stories, one in the South, which was overt segregation, right, with the separate entrances, but the other in the North, supposedly the bastion of tolerance and abolition, where there was more like overt racism. You could attend Capitol College, but you weren't able to cross certain social lines. And I wanted to ask you about, as you made your way to California, could you speak to the persistence of what I would call social racism that continued even after legal segregation was gone? So maybe what were the changes you observed in society from the 60s to the 70s to the 80s to California?
And I thank you for the question. It was, to say that it was a monumental shift moving from Ohio to California is to be an understatement. The first thing that occurred to me was I was living in an area with my cousins, and it's green lawns and single family homes and stuff. And they said, that this is the ghetto. And I said, that's impossible. You have lawns. You have single family homes. People have flowers in their yards. This cannot be a ghetto. And so the reality of redlining, began to be a discussion. These were the areas where they could buy homes. They couldn't buy homes in other areas. It became much more subtle. The racism became much less overt. It became economic. It became societal. It became civic. I was in Los Angeles when they elected the first Black mayor, and it was a sea change. The ability of a politician to overcome all of the inherent racism in Los Angeles was an amazing thing. But he had been the police chief, and he had gotten a lot of, mileage out of being police chief. But once again, the racism was much more sub rosa. It wasn't in your face, but it was in your life. It wasn't, I'm not going to beat you, but I will restrict you. I'm not going to, yell at you in public, but I am going to prevent you from having access to things that would allow you to grow in certain ways. So that's right. It wasn't in your face, but it was in your life.
Yeah, wow. Okay. Oh, my friend, thank you so much. This is one of those times where I feel like we're on, I don't know, Ellen or the news or Today Show, where we've got to see sub-minutes and we wanted to see 15 or 20 with each person. We do have many comments, but I've also got one question. I think Janice from Kincardine, and Janice was asking, how old were you when your family had to move north to Ohio?
2 years old.
2 years old.
As a matter of fact, I celebrated my second year birthday on the ferry from Chicago to Cleveland, because we had to flee in the middle of the night. And my mom had prepared this big second birthday party for me and everything, which we could not have. So they found a cake for me on the ferry boat, because there was a ferry from Chicago to Cleveland, and we were actually on that ferry on my birthday.
Oh my God.
I was 2 years old.
Well, thank you. Dr. Knight, how about if we do this? How about if we do a really quick unmute and give some real love and say thank you so much for sharing tonight.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah,
Thank you indeed. Thank you much, brother.
Prayers for you. Oh my God.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. And if we do lose you, I can see all the texts, the little dark boxes of people who are not using their lights too much. So God bless all of you. And if we do lose you, thank you again. And hopefully you'll be able to stay on and enjoy Carolyn and Brendan sharing as well. And Brendan, you called yourself the baby of this group. And so you said it was up to Carolyn to go next. So my friend, with your new speakers, bring it on. Carolyn, they're all yours.
All right. Good evening, everyone. This is exciting and challenging at the same time. I thought I was a baby boomer. I was born in 1948. Is that not in the right set of numbers? I don't know. At any rate, I was born and raised in a little town in Central Florida, not far from Daytona Beach, where Brendan lives and serves now. But man, what I know is that growing up, there were signs everywhere, colored only. The bus station, there were some places you just couldn't even go, like the local swimming pool. I remember when they built the Civic Center in my town, Black people could not have any events there. You couldn't attend anything, and you certainly couldn't rent for your own affair. So I left after high school, and well, you know what? Before that, I have to tell you, my granddaddy was a Baptist preacher, but he was an unschooled preacher. He never learned to read, but he had memorized so many scriptures he could preach. But my mother was one of 10 children, count them 10. And of that 10, I think half of them, well, all of them finished high school, I believe. But 5 or 6 of them finished college. So that for my siblings, college was an expectation as well as yours. But my mother got her master's degree in elementary ed by going to summer school in Tallahassee, Florida at Florida A&M University, summer after summer after summer. The summer that I was 10 years old, I had started the summer in Jacksonville, staying with one of my aunts and my cousin. And halfway through the summer, we caught the bus from Jacksonville straight across the Panhandle to Tallahassee. Not as far as Pensacola, about halfway that distance. We got to the bus station before my mom arrived to pick us up. I was 10, my cousin was 10 or maybe 9. She's almost a year younger, not quite. We standing around. I didn't see any signs saying white and colored. I was thinking that's kind of strange because I knew they were everywhere else, but I thought, hey, this is the state capitol. Maybe they don't do that here. So we went in the only waiting room we saw a sign saying waiting room, and we sat down and we were waiting, and we decided we wanted some lifesavers. So we went up to the counter to buy however much it cost, nickel, dime, quarter lifesavers. And the lady behind the counter said, if you know what's good for you, you'll get your little black out of here. And I was taken aback and shocked and scared at 10 years old. And I thought, I got money. What's wrong with this? She don't want me to pay for my stuff. And then I noticed this officer with a billy club beating it in his hand like that, walking around back and forth, kind of looking at us really funny, like, I know this man think he gonna hit me. But I wasn't gonna wait around to see. So I tried to get outside to a phone booth to call my mom, and told her that we needed to come now. She needed to come get us right away, that we didn't feel safe. And she got there while I was trying to reach her on the phone. It was a pay phone. Didn't have any cell phones back then. So it was a great summer after that. But that was the first time for me being confronted face to face and told ugly things to my face by a person of European descent. I refuse to call people white because that is such a, and it's not real. It's conjured up. And so when we learn the history of that, I don't think any of y'all would want to be white. But at any rate, people of European descent, you have a heritage and people and land you came from to get here. Moving on, I lived through all of that, and I graduated high school from a Black segregated school. I was the last class, 1966, in Sanford, Florida. Crooms Academy, it was called, had been the Black high school all my life. But the next year after I graduated, it became a middle school as forced integration took place. I had missed all of that. So I never had to go to school with people of European descent until after high school. My younger sister, however, and my baby brother had to go to public schools with European American children, and they caught hell, forgive my French, but they were spit on and talked bad to and hit and beat, and they tried to be caught in fights. And my baby sister came home crying most days, and I felt so bad for her. But I thought, okay, it's not fair that I graduated high school in my safe all Black high school with my wonderful Black instructors and friends. I should go to a college that is mixed, because after all, I was aware of the civil rights movement. People have been dying and getting beat and killed, and so I can go to any school I pick. I picked Southern Baptist School in Abilene, Texas, Hardin University. Mainly I picked it because I wanted to work in the church, and they offered a degree, bachelor's degree in religious education. Off I went. My freshman year is the year that Dr. King was assassinated. After his assassination, young people of European descent that I thought were befriending me, I overheard talking about how Dr. King was a communist and a traitor. He got what was coming to him, and what do these Black people think they want anyway? I went, oh my God, I'm in this school halfway across the country. I can't just up and go home because I feel like I want to. It was kind of like trapped. So what do? I managed to graduate with good grades. Had some wonderful experiences there in spite of the attitudes of some, because thank God there are always a saint or two around who want to fix that particular expression of racism. But I graduated in 71 and went back to my Black haven in Florida, Central Florida, and worked at a Black church for a little while, and then went to seminary at a Black seminary. But I'll tell you what happened to me in seminary that has me here as a part of MCC today. As I entered this predominantly Black seminary, one European American man was a student coming in with my class, the only one. And so having been the only female at Hardin Simmons when I entered, I kind of was attracted to this one European American man, and this was 1973. I thought, ooh, he's not going to be treated well. And his name was Jim Snow, and I got to talking to him during orientation. He was the assistant pastor at MCC in Atlanta. And I asked him, why would you pick this seminary? Because he was a big old guy, 6'3". He could pass for straight because he didn't swish so much, and he was huge, a big old guy. Wasn't nobody gonna mess with him. He told me that he was called to work with a minority group. He said homosexuals or gay people, and he felt he needed to be in a situation where he knew he was a minority and he could feel what that was like. He said, I know I could pass for anything I want in America if I wanted to, but I feel called to do this. And I started visiting MCC because of him, and the rest is history. I graduated seminary, went to work for a little while for the Southern Baptist in Georgia. Got asked to leave because they thought I might be gay, and so I was affiliated already with MCC, and that became my sanctuary for real, safe place to continue to grow and develop and to figure out about race. I was not under the illusion that people in MCC would be racial free of racial attitudes. I knew that. But I thought a place where we could talk. And some of that has been true. And it's becoming more true in this day and age, and I'm grateful for that. But that's kind of my story, how I got to here. And what keeps me here is that I claim Troy's dream as my own, and his vision for a church that is truly inclusive. I decided if I leave, I can't help make it inclusive. So I've stayed, but I'll welcome any questions.
I love that, Carolyn. That if I leave, I can't help but be more inclusive. Can you? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Some of us need to stay in the fight, to stay in the struggle, right? Of the organizations we belong to. 100%. 100%. I've got someone mentioned, did you say you attended Florida A&M?
My mother attended Florida A&M.
Your mother.
I was a kid while she was in summer school, we were there taking swim lessons and listening to the band and the orchestras and all that stuff.
All right. And you, I also, just because you spoke it into, you said that you lived in Tulsa. And I think if we remember right, during Kwanzaa night, you also began to tell some stories around Tulsa. So maybe you could just touch on that.
Very late. Yeah. I was the interim pastor. Well, when I was at Resurrection, which is the first place I served full-time in Houston, I did what they call the tour. I was a preaching tour, and I got to go to Tulsa for the first time then. So after I left in 2005, after 15 years on the staff at Resurrection, I did a brief thing with my family in Tampa, and then was called to be an interim pastor. I had just taken the training at what was then MCC United in Tulsa. There were 3 MCCs in Tulsa when I was in Texas, but now there was only one, and it had kind of collapsed the other 2 into them. So it was while I was their interim pastor that I became acquainted with some other clergy from Tulsa who told me all about special events. I was a part of a little clergy group, kind of renegade group that did very special and wonderful things. And one of them was every year they participated in a march that commemorated the race riots of 1921. It's the first I'd heard about it. I bought the CD package that tells the whole story, but I also went to an event where 3 survivors of that tragedy told their stories of being children hidden away and somehow managed to escape all that fire, and their parents were killed and their churches were burned and so much had happened, but they managed to survive and live to tell the story. And I was blown away. And as I talked to people from Tulsa who had been through that, they said, Yeah, Tulsa was an awesome place in the 20s for African Americans. It was like a little Wall Street. I said, wow, they had their own businesses, they had grocery stores and restaurants and a tavern and just everything. And there was on their side of the tracks, literally railroad tracks, you had to cross to get to the black side. And the only thing anyone can figure is that there was jealousy on the part of European Americans who didn't think that these black folk or former slaves should be doing quite so well. They had left slavery and were fleeing west toward California and settled in Tulsa, built their own community, and were thriving. And it was literally burned to the ground. People, rich European Americans who had a plane and could build Molotov cocktails, actually flew over the African American community, dropping or throwing out these cocktail bombs that burned many churches, many buildings, many businesses and homes. And they actually carted off the African Americans and put them in a like a football field or stadium of some kind, much like what this country did to Japanese Americans when they interred them in places after World War II or during that time. So I learned personal stories from people who had lived through it and watched the videos and went to a couple of big rallies where they told the stories. It was fascinating.
Wow. And that was 1920, 1921?
21.
1921, and you lived there.
I lived there in
2006
or 7, longer there.
Yeah, wow. Parallels to you hearing their stories and us being here present and honored to be hearing your stories tonight.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I
Eddie?
just
Go ahead,
wanted to
Cheryl.
say thanks, Rev. Carolyn. The thing that's so interesting to me is I've never been called before a European American, and that's very interesting to me. And thank you, Rev. Brendan, for putting out this book out here, How the Irish Became White, book that talks about how and why the invention of whiteness in the U.S. I'm going to read that because that looks like, wow, that's very, very interesting to me. I'd never even heard of that before. So thank you for raising that up.
You're welcome. Let me tell you one of the reasons I even brought it up. There was when I was at Resurrection in Houston, one of the first babies born to a lesbian couple in that church was a little girl named Allison. And by the time she was about 10 or 11, she told her mother, "Mama, I don't want to be white. I don't like that." And she said, her mother asked her why. She said, "White people have a very mean history. I don't want to be a part of that." Fortunately, one of her mothers was Puerto Rican and the other one was, oh God, not Irish, but they are redheaded people. Sometimes they're Irish, sometimes not. But I think she claimed that she was Irish. And so they were able to talk about their background and talk about how she was partly Puerto Rican and partly Irish. And so I think everybody benefits from having their own heritage and claiming it, good and the bad.
Yes.
Nobody's proud to have been a slave, but that's a part of my family history and my, ethnic history, that we were enslaved. Nothing for me to feel bad about or be ashamed of. I need to be proud of people like Harriet Tubman who helped us get out. Yeah. So but claiming whatever part of your ancestors may be from will no doubt be a blessing, I hope, for you.
Mm.
And I think it's important to realize that when several variations of Europeans came to these shores, they were not automatically welcomed with open arms. The Irish were not welcomed. No. As a matter of fact, they were discriminated against. There was a thing that said Irish and dogs need not apply. I mean, they literally had an incredibly difficult time, as did the Italians, as did some of the Eastern Europeans. Everyone who came had their own way to ascend into the society. Some managed to assimilate, and others of us who don't get to pretend that we're anything other than what we are. We don't have that same option.
Stevie Wonder did a song said, "You can't hide your face." You can try to hide other things, but you can't hide your face.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, and many changed their names. I mean, it's just the story of how America is supposed to be this great statue with welcome open arms, when that is absolutely not the truth or the experience. So thank you for this. Thank you for bringing this up, Carolyn. And also thank you, Brendan, for putting the book. So in the chat room there, How the Irish Became White. Grab that one for sure. There's been some comments, Cheryl, we might make this into our, for one of our book clubs. So we'll take a read on that and take a look at this. Also, just some concepts of American history 100 years ago this year, that we have to hear these stories and learn. Absolutely. Absolutely. And Brendan, right before you go, Barb is going to try, I believe, for every year or every week, sorry, during Black History Month, we are lifting up a couple different of the HBCUs. And that's where I wanted to say, Carolyn, since your mother went to one of those schools, we want to lift up quickly. And then Brendan, will slide over to you and to hear your story as well tonight. So Barb, if you can speak, and I'm not sure that you can, here are your slides for Spelman College from Atlanta, Georgia.
I almost attended Spelman, and I was thinking about FAMU, and then I decided I needed to go to European American School to honor Dr. King and so many others. I have lost my picture, but I hope I can still be heard.
Oh, we can hear you. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I don't know how to get the pictures back.
Yeah, and my cousin went to Spelman.
There we go. So this is the right school on the right night.
And my brother went to Morehouse College, and so did
Which
two
was
other
last week.
cousins.
Yeah. Thank you, Carolyn.
Sister, brother school.
Yeah. Barb, can you speak or can we not speak? You're on mute right now on your phone, I think. I'm going to give you 1001, 1002, and then I'm going to read it.
Good, do that.
Okay. So each week during February, we are speaking to one of our HBCUs.
Hello? Can you hear
There
me?
you are. Yeah,
There
Barb,
she is.
take over, hon.
All right, I'm going to do this really fast because my audio and my system is crashing on and off. So we focused this month on HBCUs, and we looked a little bit in general about HBCUs as a group. And then last week we talked about Morehouse. So this week we're going to look at Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia, founded 1881. One of the schools, from the HBCU perspective, between the end of the Civil War and the Civil Rights Act in the United States. Founded as the Atlanta Baptist Female Seminary and renamed in 1924. And I put in there, graduates include academics, ministers, business leaders, authors, lawyers, politicians, because really Spelman is a liberal arts college, but the graduates really serve in all walks of life. It's a women's college, approximately 2,100 students, and is ranked as the #1 HBCU in the 2020 U.S. News and World Report, in the top 10 for social mobility and innovation.
Wow.
So
Wow.
go ahead, Joe, if you.
Did my slide change, Barb? Can you see?
Joe, can you advance that?
I have done that on mine. I think we're having a delay due to snow and cold. This second slide speaks to a couple graduates.
Can you advance that, Joe?
I have, Barb. I think it's just not advanced for you.
Okay.
Do you know what the slide says? Or I can read it. I'm going to speak to Stacey Abrams. Obviously, anybody who's been listening to anything about Georgia in the last little bit here, Stacey
I see it
Abrams,
now.
as a politician and an activist.
Yes.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Barb.
Yes. Just two well-known women leaders who have made the news. If you follow the business news, Rosalind Brewer from the class of 1984, in another month will become the CEO of Walgreens.
Wow.
And is currently the COO of Starbucks. So significant business leader.
Wow.
And the mission statement of Spelman is there on. Yeah.
We're losing you, Barb. I'm going to say Spelman empowers
so
the whole person to engage the many cultures of the world and inspires a commitment to positive social change. So as Barb says, clearly the folks, the graduates, are serving in many areas. both economics, politics around our world and different cultures. I will just offer these another few graduates that you may know. Audra F Manley in class of 55, a pediatrician, and the first African-American woman appointed to chief resident at Cook County Children's Hospital in Chicago. She was the first assistant surgeon general, holding the rank of rear admiral, and the 8th president of Spelman College, just in the last 1997 to 2002. Marion Wright Edelman, president of the Children's Defense Fund, Presidential Medal of Freedom award winner, and also earned the Albert Schweitzer Prize for Humanitarianism. Bernice Johnson Reagan, who you may hear from in March, right, during CLM, composer, scholar, social activist. She's a founding member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and a founder of Sweet Honey in the Rock, an a cappella musical ensemble that if you have not heard them, my friends, Google them tonight and be blessed in your evening. They will warm you no matter what temperature is surrounding you tonight. Bernice King, once again, a minister, civil rights activist, and CEO of the King Center. And then Keisha Knight Pulliam, actress from The Cosby Show. She was Rudy Huxtable, and also played Candace Washington and Medea Goes to Jail. So a little bit of love for Spelman College. Thank you, Barb. Sorry we couldn't hear you or you couldn't hear us, or there's a little bit of a disconnect. Barb's doing great work all month as we showcase a different university, a different HBCU each week of this month. So Brendan, my friend.
Thank you, Rev Carolyn, too.
Absolutely. Oh, some love. Let's unmute and give Carolyn some loud noise. Some loud love.
Thank you, Carolyn. It's great.
Yeah.
Brendan, they are all yours.
Well, I'm not going to hold you long. I'm not going to be
Oh,
a Baptist
honey,
preacher
don't
tonight.
worry. Don't worry. It's just like a sermon, but if it's good, we're okay. If people have to get off, they get off.
I got 3 pages and 3 points, so let's see what we can go up with.
Bring it, my
But I do want to give a shout out, since we're talking about HBCUs. I am a graduate of the Hampton Institute, now university.
There you go.
They got fancy, so they changed the name, and so that's okay. And my cousins went to Howard University, and my sister graduated from Virginia State College, now university. So we're all HBCU graduates. Shout out to all my peeps.
There you go.
So that's kind of the HBCU thing. The other factoid, thank you, Jovi and Bob, for bringing it up. Actually, Bernice Johnson Reagan was my graduate advisor when I was at AU.
No.
And so I have a deep love for that woman beyond words. And so when I saw her name, I started to tear. I'm like, oh my God, there she is again. I just absolutely love her. She is just unbelievable. And PBS did a special yesterday on Freedom Riders, a 2-part special. And if you listen to the singing really carefully, she's leading most of the songs on the documentary.
My goodness.
So I was just a mess, but a good mess.
I didn't know that.
So, yeah, so we go back, and the one thing I will never forget, a lesson that she taught me that she didn't realize she was teaching me. We were having a discussion. It may have been around the Noel book. But just having a discussion, she looked at me, she pulled her chair up to me, she started to lean in, as only grandmamas and mamas can do, to kind of lean in when they want to talk to you. And she just kind of leaned in, and she said, I want you to hear this from me and hear me good. Don't you ever feel like you have to bow your heads for anything or for anybody. There's much work for you to do. And I have never forgotten that. And so I hold that, wherever I go and the things that I do. So I'm Brendan. I'm in Florida, where it's hot one day and cold the next. And so there you go. Carolyn is actually 2 years into the baby boomer generation. I'm at the last 2 years of the baby boomer generation. So that's kind of fun. She was in 48. I was in 62. That generation ends in 64. So I'm right at the 2 years before the end of it. Was born in Norfolk, and Norfolk Community Hospital actually was the Black community hospital in Norfolk at that time. That was actually established by Tidewater Colored Graduates Assistance Association in Norfolk. And they had a maternity ward, and that's where I was born. And ultimately raised in Suffolk, Virginia. If you know nothing about Suffolk, if you eat Planters peanuts, you pay us royalties every time you eat Planters peanuts. The first plant, the major processing plant, all the production comes out of Suffolk, which literally I could see from the back door of my grandmother's house. That's where the plant was. We have a large history, in Suffolk, and I was raised there all of my life. And the more I listen to William and Carolyn, as I keep hearing my mom and my aunt and ancestors just talking, I realized even as one at the last 2 years of the baby boomer generation, many of us at that time, particularly young Black kids growing up, our parents did everything they could to protect us from the madness that they had to deal with on a daily basis. That was called racism. My mother didn't drive, and for years she walked from my grandmother's house across town. She scrubbed floors for Miss Whitley, what was her name? She scrubbed floors for Miss Whitley, and she did that until she was able to get her LPN nursing degree for years. And that's what she did because she wanted to help raise me. I have a sister that's 17 years older than I am. So when I was born, my sister was getting ready to go to college. So my mother was like, she had to make this thing work somehow. And so she got her license, became a nurse, and got a job working as an LPN on what was the colored ward at Overseas Hospital in Suffolk at that time, which remained the colored ward until my sophomore year in high school. If that gives you any indication, that was in the
Brandon, what year
late
was
70s.
that?
That was in the late 70s, like 76, 77.
So it stayed, there was a colored
oh, yeah.
ward in
Yes.
the hospital in the late 70s.
And there was a entrance designated for colored staff that included nurses, that included physicians. There was a door in, there was a door out. And so, and I used that door regularly because when I didn't have anybody to babysit me, when mother was working, I would sit in the lounge and do my homework, eating Kentucky Fried Chicken, praise the Lord. So now, that's the way it was back in the day. So I didn't have a taste or a real inkling of the depth or the toxicity of racism until I crossed to the other side of the tracks, as Carolyn alluded to. For us, the railroad tracks was the dividing line. That was the line of demarcation, and anything west of the railroad tracks was exclusively primarily white, and anything east of the railroad tracks was primarily Black, or what we would call low, people of European descent on the very low end of the totem pole, who were on the other side of the Black community. So we had our established Black community. It was called the Fairgrounds. We had a pharmacy. We had 2 restaurants. We had 2 doctor's offices. Everything was pretty much handled within that scope of the Fairgrounds. So unless we had reason to go across to the other side of the tracks, we didn't experience that. I happened to be one of the fortunate ones who was kind of sickly growing up. And so it was not uncommon, at least once a month, sometimes twice a month, that I would have to go to the doctor. My primary doctor was in Norfolk. My mother didn't drive. We had to take the bus. So we had to go across the track to go to the bus station. And that's when I had my first introduction as a kid to separate entrances, colored only, whites only, the whole deal around water fountains. And I got a rude awakening because I simply wanted some water, like Miss Jane Pittman. I just wanted some water. And my mother politely reminded me, this is where you go for water. And she said it very quietly. And I just kind of looked at her and I remember saying to her, why? And she said, I will tell you. And she did explain it to me on the bus, that this is the way things have to be. And she just left it at that. And so for years, that was how we lived. You had separate entrances. When you had to do laundry, we didn't have a washing machine at my grandmother's house. And so we had to go across the tracks to get our laundry done because you had to pay the white man to get your laundry done. And so that was the way things rolled. And then my mother was able to amass enough money to get, a washing machine. Some of y'all do not know the old ringing piece. We had to run it through to draw. Oh yeah. And then hang the clothes on the line. Yeah, that's my reality. We didn't have central heat. We didn't have central air. As a matter of fact, I didn't have access to a shower until I turned 15 years old. We just didn't have those amenities. And I say that to say, we didn't have much. And for all intent and purposes, we were poor and we were impoverished. But you would never know that when we stepped out in public. That's just who my mother was. And so she took care of herself. She took care of her older sister who was having some issues. She took care of me. She took care of my sister. She did what she needed to do, take care of her kids and take care of her own. And the church was a big part of that. I can't tell you where I would be today. I've said this for years, I'll continue to say it. I don't know where I would be had it not been for my Black church. They were my babysitters, they were my teachers, they were the ones who caught me when I didn't want to be caught because I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. I didn't know they were there, and they would call me by name. I'm thinking, oh yeah, okay. So all that stuff. But I didn't understand it then, but I understand it now. They were looking out for me because they had already been through what they didn't want me to go through.
Yeah.
And so that was really real. I remember going into a Woolworth store, coming from school, and walking in the front door of Woolworths, and Miss Dolores Williams, I'll never forget, she said, baby, I need you to go back out and come back around. I'll never forget her telling me that. And it's just, you're in this moment where it's like, okay, you didn't do anything wrong, except you just look wrong, that type of thing. And this was right at the peak of integration or desegregation. And Suffolk, God bless its heart, Suffolk and Nansemond County, they were the first city and county, the last to integrate in the state of Virginia, the very last. And so, and they fought it tooth and nail. And so when we got to that place of, sharing classroom space with people who didn't look like us anymore, that was like really weird. And weird from the sense that there's something different about this. Even the teaching was different. Being taught by Black teachers was very different than having all the instruction coming from white teachers who are trying to be just as gentle as they can be because they're not real sure what kind of the lay of the land is. And so you don't get all of the information, you don't get all of the history. So it got really skewed for us, particularly around middle school and high school. But once I got into high school, and you do that love thing, the heart started to flood. You start, and I felt smitten for this white woman, and remember it like it happened yesterday, and didn't think anything about it, didn't see anything wrong with it. Neither did she in the moment, because that was just the way it was. Fortunately, my mother was a nurse. Her father happened to be an orthopedic surgeon at the same hospital. And her mother was also a retired nurse who also was on the school board. And so these were like activists, from way back. And so they were like, okay, it is what it is. Also understanding the framework that we had to kind of navigate, during that time. And so we had moments where we would decide to go out to dinner particular places, and we realized we couldn't go there. She could go, but I couldn't go.
Yeah.
It was the way it was. And I had that come back full circle for me, believe it or not, in 1989. Some of you remember Hurricane Hugo that came through and devastated Charleston, South Carolina. I had been was a member of New Life MCC in Norfolk at the time. We packed up a bunch of trucks. We loaded trucks with food and all kinds of stuff. And we drove the trucks to Charleston. I ended up going back and preaching for them that next month. They were in a townhome, we were in a townhome at that time, preaching for them the next month. They wanted to go out to lunch. Fine, I'm good. As long as it's fried chicken, I'm good. And so they found this wonderful restaurant in downtown Charleston, which I'm thinking, it was smelling good. I could smell the grease before I even hit the dough. So I know it's going to be some good eating, right? And I get to the door, and I kid you not, there was an index card, a little white index card in the corner of the window that said, for whites only.
No.
In 1989.
1989.
In Charleston.
And I just lost it.
Yes.
On lots of different levels, but in that moment, as a history teacher, as a preacher, a pastor, a theologian, all of that stuff came back like just in my face. And they were more mortified probably than I was. And I think they were for me, because they didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And the sadder part is I knew what to do. I couldn't go. And so I bring that to this conversation because I want us to understand that this is not done. We're far from done.
No.
And there are times when my heart is grieved to no end. When I hear or see or read things that I know, as William said, you have the wrong intention, but you don't realize you have the wrong intention. And so at what times, at what moments do we capitalize on these moments to make them teachable moments,
Yes.
where we can learn from what just occurred, where we can learn from what was just said. We live in Daytona Beach. Everybody who knows my wife, you know, she's from Concord, North Carolina. She my Southern gal. So even with that said, she is more concerned about me being in Daytona than she is about her being in Daytona. That's the reality that we live with. And so my whole contribution, I think, to this conversation is simply this. Whenever you see me or anybody who looks like me, there's a lot that goes along with this person.
Yes.
There's a lot that comes with this person. There's a lot of folks that are holding us up, the Carolyns and the Williams that are holding us up because they realize that sometimes we're on territory that can be very, very toxic and very, very violent territory. It doesn't have to be physical. It can be verbal. It can be emotional. It can be something as simple as being silent and being ignored. That comes across as very tough. And so I stay in the conversation. I stay in MCC, number one, because God's not released me from my call. So that's a good thing. But number two, this is where God has planted me. So I'm not leaving until God says it's time for me to go. So until that changes, I'm here. I'm here to hopefully plant some seeds to make a difference and water those seeds in a way that we can all get to the place of seeing the greenness, Joby, of seeing the greenness that we all bring to this thing called the mosaic of life. Because there are too many of us who are still trying to ignore our history.
Yeah.
And if we don't understand anything but history, are bound to repeat their history. And that's where we're living right now.
Yes.
And so there's lots to all of this. I mean, I could talk about, you know, all my school stuff and going to kindergarten and Head Start. Some of y'all don't even know about Head Start. But that's what they did for Black children because we couldn't go to school. So they had Head Start programs and kindergarten programs. And Annie B. Willis was her name. She was the director of the Jordan Neighbor House School in Suffolk. We had to walk there every day. And Annie B. Willis comes full circle in my life because I didn't know then that she was a member of the Unitarian Universalist Church in Norfolk. Her father was the first African-American Universalist minister out of that church. And the UU Church in Norfolk was the church where I first got introduced to MCC.
Wow. Oh, that's like
so that came full circle. And whose picture is on the wall when I walk in? Annie B. Willis. So things come full circle for me, have a way of affirming that you're in the right place and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, but it also comes at a cost. It does come at a cost. And it's a cost I'm willing to pay because I'm able to see the fruits of the labors of so many who came before me. I have thought about Dolores so much the past couple of months. She just keeps following me because our work is not done. Right. And so I'm here. And I'm willing to be, the sounding board. I can be an educational tool. As I say to people, if you don't know the answers to the question, don't ask me. Because I'm gonna tell you the truth. And I'm gonna tell you my truth. And so it wasn't always easy. And I had it easier than others because I'm a lot lighter than some of my other Black brothers and sisters. And there's a color gradient that happens in the United States. So the lighter the Black you are, the better chances you have at passing or passing through. And so I had some of those advantages, and I had siblings. I had relatives who did not have those advantages, including my sister, because of the darkness of her skin. So that's all, the reality that is lived. I don't put my Blackness on the shelf anytime. I go to sleep with it, I wake up with it, and everything else to go, it's all me, and I love every inch of me. I just hope one day everybody else can do the same.
Oh my goodness. Oh, Brendan.
Amen.
Okay. Brendan, yeah, let's do it again. Give him some noise. Give him some noise and give him some love.
Yay, I love you. Amen. Amen.
Awesome,
Amen.
awesome.
Brendan, can I ask a question though?
Uh-huh.
Cheryl?
You talked about, Yeah.
Look,
what?
I know we're going over again, and I don't care. This is phenomenal. I just want to know if folks need to drop off. God bless you. Thank you for coming. Read Fanny Flag. Can't wait to get to heaven and come back next week, and then come back for all of March for CLM. And now let's keep going. So all yours.
And the other PSR before you go, if you have to drop off, PBS starting 15 minutes ago has started a 2-night special on the Black Church. Part 1 starts tonight. Part 2 is tomorrow night, 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Central.
Wow.
So you need to be taping it right now if you're here.
I just ordered my wife to do so, so I'm good.
What is the name of it? Brendan?
Black Church, the Black Church.
Black Church.
Oh.
All right, I'm going to turn around and do that while Cheryl asks you this question.
Sure.
Me too.
Yeah, I heard you say that your mom really protected you and protected you guys. They all protected all the kids as much as they could. One of the things that, you know, we've all heard over and over again is that parents always told their Black sons, you know, watch out when you're around cops. Don't just be polite. Don't try and go against them or whatever. Did your mom tell you that too? Is that?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that question, Cheryl. Because I actually wrote it down as a note and I didn't get to it. Pre-transition, that was never a conversation.
Yeah.
It just wasn't. What I can tell you now in the fullness of who I am, that is a daily thought, that is a daily reminder, and it's a daily fear that Sandra lives with. We understand that I could leave the house tomorrow and not come back. We do live in Daytona Beach. It is a ruby red state, and it is what it is. So that's real. You know, when I see police, I have a heightened sense of awareness about, you know, posturing, what am I doing, where am I at, that's real for me. Growing up as a kid, it wasn't for me, but it was for my other cousins who were male football players, you know, kind of the studs, if you will, back in the day. And so my uncles, I remember many conversations, him always telling boy, be careful. That's how he would say it. Boy, just be careful.
Right.
Because there was no guarantee, particularly in a small town like Suffolk, as big as it is land-wise. It was a small town. And it was really easy to get lynched or to get burned and never to be found. That's how dense the force can be. So it wasn't a reality for me growing up as a kid, but certainly now, definitely.
Yeah.
And Brendan,
Wait, else one.
No, I have. I
hold on. I'm going to jump in here. So Brendan, there's a lot of people on this call that when you do a throwaway term like pre-transition,
Oh, yes.
not something I would lift up tonight. So you when you're telling us these stories, it's of being a little Black girl.
Yes, that is correct.
And then you transitioned in your adult life, which again, Cheryl makes that a really powerful question. So if you wouldn't mind speaking to that, Brendan.
Yeah, well, that's a whole like 35 pages.
I know. I'm just in the context of this evening's conversation.
Let me give you the short end of it. Brendan has always known Brendan since way back in the day. And because of my spiritual gift, it was much more important for other people around me, including my family, to be happy first, and then everything else will come after that. And I determined, with the help of my beautiful wife, that I was not going to live the next half of my life being half of who I knew myself always to be. And so I made the transition. Actually, I came out at church in the middle of an Easter sermon, and they remember the sermon well. I'll come out, so can I. And so, and that was the subtitle to the empty tomb sermon. I did it 3 services, and they transitioned with me. It was a growing moment for them. It was a growing moment for me. It was a gifted God moment for all of us. They are better for it, and I'm much richer for it in terms of ministry and the ability to be present with people right where they are in the journey. And that's the greatest joy I think that I bring. Just be you, you know. God already knows it, so just be you. The rest of it will take care of itself. I just happen to have a pushy wife, and so she just kind of, you know, it is what it is, and I love her dearly for it.
And what years was that, Brendan, that you you lived that transition with the church?
I officially came out in 2009, and officially transitioned in 2000, totally in 2010, 2011.
So just in this last decade. So
Mhm.
again, and thank you. And Cheryl, thank you for the question, because I
Yeah,
just know there are folks on this call that don't know that part of your story. And
Yeah.
it does make a difference when we're talking about how does a little Black girl go through those same cautions, Cheryl, from a parent as compared to a little Black boy or a maturing Black man.
Mhm.
yeah, and yet I know I have a good friend who, a Black woman who, she's stopped by the police as she's driving off a car lot, having purchased a car, and has stopped and asked for the papers.
Sure.
I mean, for crying out loud, and
That's
so
very
women
right.
get stopped too, and she still had to play the game and be polite and do all that stuff, or they would have told her she stole the car.
But I think given the political climate over the last 5 to 6 years has only exacerbated that.
Yes.
And I need to be very clear. I'll say to you, like I say to my people, I don't care how you vote, just vote. Just know how you vote sometimes has consequences. It is what it is. And so the client, I think has contributed, I think William alluded to this, to the increase in a sense of permission to live in one's racist reality more publicly. And that is a very dangerous place for this country to be right now.
Yeah.
For lots of different reasons. The 60s, 50s, and 60s is part of it. But we live in a time right now in this country where access to firepower is off the chain. And it's just, I'm still gonna believe that we're gonna get through this. There's gonna be some bloodshed, but I'm gonna believe that we're gonna get through this, and we will be better for it.
Thank you, Brendan. Edie?
Yeah, so well, first of all, after those comments, I will say, yeah, I'm a beneficiary of white woman privilege.
White woman's privilege, yes.
We don't get pulled over and asked if we have the receipt for the car. I will say, just as a perspective, so Joe and Cheryl and I are all veterans of the military in the same era.
Mhm.
And so we came into a military that said women can't do that, and we kind of accepted it as well. That's just the way it is. We can't do that. And the way I came to try to explain that to people was, and we would hear all these lame arguments about upper body strength and G suits and all this crap. And so now we live in a day and time when women are permitted. So in my mind, I was like, okay, if you're telling me I can't do it, let me at least try and fail.
Mhm. Right.
So the point is that people of color are not condemned because racists think they'll fail. They're condemned because they're terrified of your success.
Mhm.
They're terrified of of you being superior intellectually or physically or anything else, because that there are a lot of scholars who hate the term hegemony. But I don't think you can ignore hegemonic masculinity, and hegemonic masculinity is white masculinity. Coming from that one little sector where somebody told me, no, we're not even going to let you try, or if we let you try, we're going to severely limit. I wanted to go to navigator training, and the ROTC only took 6 women a year from across the entire country. And what I was told by the general, the ROTC was, well, we have a problem with women getting pregnant. And I'm like, well, if you could get pregnant, I'd be delighted for that. But, don't be making up an excuse when you don't have one.
Right.
So I would just offer that
Yeah.
You are not feared. You are not, the people who express that racism fear your success and your gentleness and your kindness and your understanding. That's your weapon.
I would agree with that. And I think in addition to that, I think there's also the fear of the loss of power and privilege.
Yeah.
And that's why that book, How the Irish Became White, is so critical. White fragility speaks to some of this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, this whole conundrum that we call racism and colorism in this country, it's all about power and privilege and control. And
Edie, I wanna lift up though, I wanna wrap to what William said, the grace. I've had conversations obviously over this last summer with two of my siblings, and one of them is very strong-minded that racism does not exist. And I had to, you have to find a way into that conversation. And I have another sibling that just had the conversation a week or two ago who said, really? I mean, Cheryl, to our friend who honestly drove a brand new car off a lot and was stopped because she was Black. And so what William shared tonight is many people they live in racist understanding, not out of their ill will or intention. It's they have not had the experiences yet to bounce up against that, the truth of it, right? And so when my sibling shared that she didn't believe racism existed, today, I didn't fight that because that wouldn't have been helpful.
Mhm.
I have a Black friend. I'm like, yes, okay, you do. But it's starting to learn, how can I be a part of a person who invites others into a conversation, simply trusting they haven't had the experience yet that I've been lucky to have. And Edie, a lot of the military, we were able to see a lot of the world and a lot of different cultures, and we were thrown together and told to get along, right? Because of the military culture was larger and more powerful than our racial cultures, our religious culture, what we brought to the story. And that was that game, So I said earlier tonight, unwrapping from 10 years of that was my coming out to myself of how I understood that system. And for that day, I think it served purposes, and it also caused me harm, because when I got into seminary and was having, conversations with people, my understandings were stilted and shaped. Not that I hadn't been with people of other cultures and, Black and brown people, but I wasn't told to see them. I wasn't allowed. I was told to see them, Brendan, as you just referred to again, as green. So I want to just offer, I love William, to me, softened the conversation tonight, not by saying it's not wrong, but by saying you're not wrong from being where you are if you're there from a position of lack of opportunity yet.
If I can, Joe.
Jump in, Brendan.
We all lived through the horror of what happened to George Floyd last May, and the subsequent falling out from all of that. Protests all over the country. There was one protest that happened in Richmond, Virginia, actually. My sister, my brother-in-law, they live in Glen Allen. And I have someone I graduated from high school with, lives in Richmond. And she decided to attend one of the protests that were there, that was being held that Sunday in Richmond. Happened to be there when the truck drove through and actually hit a few people who were part of the protest. She was not injured. But as a result of that, we ended up having dialogue on Facebook. And we connected. We emailed each other back and forth. Let's have a conversation. Blah, blah, blah. She says, because I really want to talk to you. She's reaching out to me. Cool, no problem. So we connected. We did a Zoom conversation, and she started out the conversation by saying, "Brendan, first of all, I need to tell you that I'm sorry." She said, "I didn't know." Her mother worked at the hospital with my mother. She worked in medical records. I went to their house and stuff. They never came to our house, but I would always go over there. And she said, I just didn't I didn't understand. I didn't know. And I remember now, 2020, Mom would always say, when you're taking, her at that time, you're taking her home, be careful because you're going on that side of the tracks. She said, I never forgot that, but now it makes sense.
Yeah.
And so she wants to be engaged in conversation. She asked me, she said, I want to learn, I want to understand, and I want to become an anti-racist. I want to do this work. And I know it's going to be hard because her brother he is who he is, God love him. But she wants to do the work. She reached out to me, and I think that's where it starts. Meeting people where they are. We grew up together. And yet it took this moment in time in history for something that happened back in the 70s and 80s to finally crystallize for her to go, oh my God, I just didn't know.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? We're still living, we're still breathing, we still got time to try to get some work done to try to get this thing right. So let's do this. So I'm scheduled to talk with her. We're gonna start the conversations again on next week. And that's where it starts for me. It's about being able to be open to have conversation and be present where people are, and willing to take the journey without judgment and without fear.
Yeah. Wow. I'm gonna, there's been a lot of folks on here just with very listening faces tonight. So it is just past 9:30. I want to just honor the folks who've been listening. If you have a comment or a question for Carolyn or Brendan, and then we'll close things up tonight, having been deeply blessed by y'all sharing your stories, being so vulnerable. Absolutely. Anything at all from anybody? Janice and Glenda.
That's a great point, Jordan.
Yeah, I had an experience. This was in 1971. I had just married. My first marriage was to a man, and he was in the military, and we had to get to North Carolina right after our wedding. We were stalled outside of Asheville because of ice, about like this kind of weather, and we slept for a while in the car. And so as it got daylight, we went on into the next town. We felt like it was safer to go up. We were in the mountains somewhere. Anyway, and we went into this little restaurant, kind of like a Denny's, I guess. And there was a African-American family sitting in the car, and they had several children, and they were eating. And I thought, well, that's weird because it's really cold. And we went into the restaurant. I said, I wonder why those people don't come in. It's so cold out there, and they've got children. And he said, dear, around here, they're not allowed. That was the biggest awakening of my life, I think. I had no idea. I was raised in Austin, in Georgetown area. And although we certainly had our problems here and our racial beliefs here, it was nothing like that. And it was like, that had to have gone away long ago. And then I later taught American history to 8th graders here in Georgetown. And that was one of the stories I would tell them, and they were just astounded. So, it was a real awakening.
Yeah, thank you, Janice. Thank you. Oh, Glenda, you had a comment you wanted to share.
I did actually. Brendan, thank you for this. I'm a white woman that lives in Canada, and I just wanted to share an article or a program that I happened to check in tonight. MSNBC at 6 o'clock in the evening, and I can't remember, it's Ari, somebody that hosts an hour-long program. And the woman he interviewed tonight has recently published a book, and it's something like Something About Us is in the title. And I'm sorry, I don't have the title, and I don't have her name, but the essence of the story she told was a family were planning to change houses. So they had to get an appraisal on their home, or an estimate on the home for the banking. And when they got the numbers, they were really amazed because they didn't seem to be reasonable relative to the market. So they were sharing their story with a neighbor, and the neighbor said, oh, let's do it again. Only this time all come over. She was white. She came
Mm.
over, she brought pictures of her family, she set them up on the mantle, and they had another company come in, and the difference was 50% on the appraised value.
Yep.
And it was nothing more than just the systemic discrimination that was being viewed. But the thing that caught my attention as they continued to tell the story was when the appraised value is that home is now sold, the taxes in the community are based on the value of the home. The school systems, the infrastructure is funded based on the tax line. Therefore, if the tax line is less, therefore fewer dollars go into the school system, therefore, and so on over the generations.
It's a vicious
And
cycle.
that was absolutely appalling when I listened to the generational impact of that one single person coming through the door for that one single family, that one time in their life.
The economics of it is amazing, right?
Yeah, there's
Absolutely awful.
there.
I just wanted to share that story because it was a real shocker for me.
Well, and it's still going on today. I mean, in Suffolk, there were major streets, or what we call major streets back in the day, that were exclusively white-only streets back in the day. And many of those same homes are now occupied by Black folks and or people of color. And the value of those properties have just gone through the tank.
I think that was in her book.
It's horrendous what has happened to those families and to their economic base. And as a result, education is starting to take a hit now, pretty much like it was when I was coming through. And hopefully it won't be as bad, but you build the larger, newer high schools out where there's no transportation to get to them. Who gets impacted? Those who don't have access. So it's a vicious cycle, unfortunately.
I'm going to go back to.
I just have another quick example. This one's kind of funny. Okay, so my girlfriend Mandy couldn't be with us tonight, and she's half Mexican. She looks Mexican. She's half Mexican. We stopped at a hotel, and they hot breakfast with your room, and there was a Latina behind the table because it was COVID, so they were serving. They weren't letting you just go through the buffet and pick. And there was a Latina, and Mandy came out, and there was the usual fare, a waffle in the shape of Texas and some scrambled eggs or something, I don't know. And Mandy looked at Latina behind the counter, and Mandy goes, "White people's food." Because she wanted some tortillas and frijoles, and I was like, I never thought of it that way, that on this little teeny weeny micro scale, I want some chorizo with my scrambled eggs, on this small scale, it's reinforcing a whiteness
Standard,
And then one last thing, I watch what I call nerd TV, and it's usually archaeological or historical or whatever. And there's a show called Extreme Archaeology, and it's all in England. And so they will uncover 9th century graves, and they will find bones in caves, and they will find a Viking structure house on some remote island in the Shetland Islands. And as they were being archaeologists and historians and talking about these people and how these people lived and how they subsisted, and I'm like, I don't have that connection to this place. So when William was talking about Mother Africa, I'm of Irish, I'm a mutt, I'm of Irish and German descent and English, and I don't really have a genealogical, biological, archaeological connection to this land that I live on. But for some reason, having that white European heritage and seeing that show and realizing that's what I came from, and that there were, I think, 20 million people on the American continent when the first Europeans showed up, and we kind of wiped them out. It's a really devastating thought for me.
Yes.
Well, if you think about it in terms of these 20 million people were people of color. These were Native Americans, people of color who were self-sufficient. They took care of themselves. They built their own homes as they understood it at that time. They cared for themselves without aid or assistance from anybody else who didn't look like them.
And
so
they also took care of the land. And Americans of European descent and those of us brought here from Africa can learn a lot from our Native American friends. But indigenous people of any hue, color-wise, tend to live in harmony with the earth. There are tribes in Africa who also understand how to be healed from what grows on the land. And you know, that the tribal life has great value. And that has been the melting pot of America. Let me just challenge those of you on this call, think about whiteness and what it means to you and where it came from. If after you do a little bit of research, you really want to embrace it, then keep talking to people, because I think you'll find that many of the people who stormed our Capitol a few weeks ago, they are lifting up whiteness. They don't call them white supremacists for nothing. They believe whiteness is supreme, not only over people of color, but over God. Think about that. And I know you don't want to give up too much privilege. I don't know how I would feel about that. If I had all that privilege, I might want to hold on to some of it too. But disenfranchise yourself from at least the horrible part and stand for a new way of looking at people whose heritage is somewhere in Europe. Find yours and embrace that. Forget whiteness. That came from a guy named Jimmy Lynch, who wanted to teach people how to not have to hang their slaves, but make them so they kill each other. And, you know, that's a sick story, but this is not the time or place. But check out whiteness and decide you don't want it.
Yeah, and that's, I think, you know, Carolyn, you're reminding us that is a construction. It's a constructed event. And Kristen, I'm going to lift your comment up here, you know, tonight, being a Gen Xer. Yeah, I was also struck listening to your story, Brendan. When William started, he talked about his grandfather and his grandmother and his mother. And the fact that you experienced something in 1989, when you went to help people, right? You know, and Carolyn, I am sure if we asked you to date a story, it would shock us again that how current, how present. And yes, over the last, you know, 5 years, many people have been given more permission to move from a covert state to an overt state. And at least, you know, at this point, you know, I don't know which is more dangerous, having that overtness or that covertness that we didn't understand to an overtness that boiled up, and now there is trauma and there's tearing apart, and there are conversations occurring because of that trauma and that tearing apart. And I'm gonna close this down here tonight, because we could probably talk till midnight, and my mother is still not opened her birthday present from us yet, because
oh no,
it's okay, we had work to do, and I've heard it tonight. There's still work to do. Is there not still work to do? So I will promise you that Sanctuary Online, we will not continue to invite these conversations. We will continue to be a place where you can be wrong, you can be ignorant, you can say the wrong thing. We will love you and challenge you, and hopefully have blessedly strong people who are gonna teach all of us, you know, and encourage us to continue to do the work. And Carolyn, I just heard that. I'm gonna do some work on what does it mean to be white. Something has, I would just offer that something has struck each of us who are listeners tonight, who are learning tonight. And I want to lift you and encourage you to chase. Lily Brock used to say, something came in and went in sideways. What is in you sideways that's kind of bothering you tonight? You know, whatever that is for each of us, God bless us that we felt it. Thank the two of you and Dr. Knight for helping us feel and helping us be encouraged, helping us recognize how present, Kristen, how real and how recent this still is, and to continue to do the work. So
The only thing I would offer, I know you're going to close, Joby, is I'm certainly open. I'm sure Carolyn would be, or William, Lynette, and others. You know, if there are additional conversations or dialogues to be had, I am more than willing to do it. This just kind of scrapes the surface. It just makes you just uncomfortable enough that you want to pull the Band-Aid back, just look at it a little bit more. And so I'm certainly willing to be a part of that conversation, whatever I can do to be present. I can't take the journey for you. I can be alongside you as you do. I'm willing to do that.
But we all have to decide what we're going to do now that we've scratched the surface, that we're bleeding a little bit, or we're hurting a little bit, a little uncomfortable. What we going to do now? Let's move forward and do something, even if it's just another conversation for now. But looking within, learning who that person is in the mirror, looking at your past. I'm blessed to be a part of a family that used to have family reunion every year. Last year was the first time in 40-something years we didn't have it. We're online this next week to talk about 2021, trying to get together for our family reunion. My mother's side, the Mullers in Central Florida, Sanford. And when I went to South Africa, I met a guy whose last name was Muller. I had to think about his people might have owned my people back in the day.
That's right. That's
right.
You
know, because he was from German descent, I think, but he's Afrikaan in South Africa. In Africa, so it was
His
something
people
else
might
to
have
think
owned
about.
your people.
That's the real deal.
That's
how my family got their name, Muller. It wasn't no Muller over there. The tribe we came from was not Muller. We traced it back to West Africa, and there wasn't no Mullers except landowners.
There you go. There you go. Man.
So thank y'all for having us.
You.
And thank you for being present.
Thank you both.
Send someone this video.
Amen.
God bless, and all those of you who are in danger of being cold, stay warm, light a candle, get a blanket.
Thank you.
Y'all stay safe, please.
Love
Thank
y'all.
you so much.
Love y'all. Take care.
Night, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it.
You bet.
Night, y'all.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, John boy. Couldn't help it. Couldn't help it.
Night, Mary Ellen.
Yeah, there you go.
Night, y'all.